What's in the mug, Alex? Is that a stage prop? Or?
All right, here we go.
Which mug are you talking about?
Coming up next on Rugby Wrap-Up, Rugby United New York owner James Kennedy and New England Freejacks owner Alex Magleby.
Rugby Wrap-Up brought to you in part by Irish Rugby Tours, the Rugby Tours people. A balanced palate, nutrition for peak performance. And the Pig and Whistle on West 36th Street, the world's best rugby pub. Hey everybody, welcome back to Rugby Wrap-Up at the Fantasy Sports Network Studio 34 in New York City, talking rugby. And Stephen Lewis, we have a couple of big shots with us. We have one in the studio in James Kennedy, the owner of Rugby United New York. Welcome, James.
Thank you, Matt. Great to be here again. It's been a while.
Good to have you, Stephen. Welcome.
Good afternoon.
All right, and we'd be remiss if we didn't welcome our other guest from the Boston area, the co-founder and CEO of the New England Freejacks, Mr. Alex Magleby. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
You dropping back to pass?
Yes, ready to go.
I'm Max. That's a rhino ball.
Yeah,
Ram is
and it's
our
great.
sponsor.
All of a sudden, we have a clash, Steve. Right out of the gate, we have a clash between owners. Isn't this great? Alex, you're with the new setup of a team that's going to take the field in 2020. You've got the exhibition competition called the Cara Cup, which Steve and I have been front and center at. James, your team is 7-1 in the current league. You're sitting in a very good situation now that you have a spate of home games ahead of you. I think all but two.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah, and one of those is Toronto at the end of the season, which is a relatively local game.
That should be a humdinger, as they say. But I wanted to ask both of you. James, you had the opportunity to sit on the sidelines last year and observe.
Yeah.
What has come about that you expected or was different while you're actually in it?
That's a good question, and there's a very long answer to that. But I would say the depth of the squad in New York, the New York players. I mean, we brought in a lot of players, but the New York players, Matina, Sinclair, Lipscomb, these guys stepping up has been expected, but not expected to the level that they're stepping up to, which is astonishing and brilliant. You know, so that's been the biggest surprise, but also not a surprise. It's hard to explain that, you know.
You had a certain expectation of the players that you were bringing in. You had confidence in them.
Yeah, and I had a belief from the exhibition season that if you put guys in an environment around guys that have players that have been trained professionally in Europe, that they will raise their game, and they have.
What about the administrative part?
It's been hard. I mean, we're learning as we go, right? But we are constantly recognizing and adjusting to errors or, you know, just administrative duties. You know, I think our marketing has been really good. I think Andrew Newman has done a fantastic job. Gets better all the time. We need to get a lot better on ticket sales, but we are working really hard on that. We need to constantly get better at getting rugby out there, not just New York, but rugby, and specifically the MLR. I think that's our next big challenge, is making the MLR a recognized brand nationally and internationally.
How much could you rely on the other teams that had been in the league last year? And then how much did you have to just go out and be kind of like a maverick and carve out your own niche?
Well, there's two parts to that again. So being cocky a little bit, we are New York. New York is a completely different animal than the rest of the country. In my opinion, it's a massive market with a lot of distractions and a lot of options. In saying that, like Seattle, Shane Skinner at Seattle has been outstanding in his advice and his mentorship, as has Dean Howes, some of the guys out in San Diego. The resources of the MLR have been great, like the learning from their experiences, but understanding that New York is a completely different market, right. as would be Boston, you know.
Right. And Alex, that leads us to you. You're a guy you're an observer by nature, if I'm not mistaken, because I've seen you staring at me bewildered a few times without saying anything. But you're in the Boston area. That's no easy place to have it either. What is it like for you with 2 seasons now that you're able to watch?
Well, I think, first of all, you called James a maverick, and that's spot on. So first of all, we got that truth in place. I think certainly with this league and everything else, like Boston or Austin or wherever it may be, at the end of the day, we're in the business of entertainment, right? And rugby is this beautiful, wonderful content that we have to sell. But our job is to entertain families for 2 hours, or you and your friends for 2 hours. And that's something as a league we're learning to do. And for us, certainly we're spending an entire year just trying to learn how to be professional on the field and educate our players as best we possibly can on what that means to be professional and changing body types and profiles. And certainly off the field is learning how to run an entertainment company. And I think that's what the growing pains everybody is going through right now. And certainly we're at the back end of that. But that's the exciting part, is because we've got this wonderful, beautiful thing that people haven't really been exposed to. And now we can share it with them in an intimate setting that it is at the same time a small community, but global. It is action-packed, but at times it's a war of attrition. And that's just the wonderful part of the content that we have the opportunity to sell. And that's what we're really excited about, is sharing it not just with our current rugby participants and making their experience better in rugby, but bringing a whole new fan base to the game. And that's been a big focus of ours as we trudge on.
How do you find the relationship between the need to entertain and the also, I guess, the relationship with the entertainment side, with the rugby side, like the need to build an elite professional sports team? How does that relate to the entertainment side, in your opinion?
Yeah, and I don't think they're mutually exclusive. The better we do at the former of making quality rugby, and you're starting to see that in the MLR this year. There's been a change in a lot of aspects. Last year was a good start, and this year the rugby has really improved, and that will continue as these players age into professionalism. Domestic-based players, as foreigners continue to challenge for spots, and as the coaching learns how to be professional. And that's been a big change in the league over the course of the year, and it's actually quite entertaining rugby, and that will continue to improve. And I don't think that is mutually exclusive to an entertainment concept in any way. I think that is the core of what we're about, and will attract fans because it is fun. It is awesome to watch these guys play.
Well, actually, you've answered the first question, which is about the quality of play. I was going to ask you between pro rugby, MLR sort of season 1 and MLR season 2 we're in right now. So have you seen an uptick in quality? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, well, from my just personally and anecdotally watching it, I think you've got players who have now had kind of 3 years of that experience, so they're in the middle of that third year. Clearly there was a gap here. So just that fact, it's almost been an entire quad where 75% of the quad, they have been paid to be professional. And they're working really hard to learn how to do that. And a lot of the player pool has responded really well. And you hear this at times that we don't have the depth in this country to do so. Yeah, immediately there is not a pool of 20,000 athletes ready to compete for the spots available in MLR. But certainly our experience has been that there are some nuggets there that are just given the right opportunity, and it will take a year, but they will get there. And that's the really exciting part about it, is the level continues to improve as they get repetitions. And I think that's the really exciting bit, is that we do have the depth there. The colleges are producing them. And over time, we'll see that increase, especially with this aspirational pathway that now exists.
All right, you're 2 for 2 in anticipating questions today. But so with the advent of 3 new teams next year, right, you're looking at another 90, 100 players. Dilution of quality, you have to have more foreign players. Is the college game producing enough players in the intermediate term? What are your thoughts on that? And then perhaps over to James, you have a thought on that too?
Well, I think it's a combination of all three, right? You have, there's certainly some foreigners that can help our domestic pool learn how to be professionals and add a bit of, our game is sellable because it's global. At the same time, it is community based, and I just think that is a big selling point for us in the States and certainly in Canada. So we don't want to see that go away as we build a much stronger domestic pool. But the opportunities for non-qualified Americans and Canadians to come in is significant relative to the roster size. 20% on a 50-man roster or so, and I also think that the college programs, there are a handful of college programs that provide a very good education and a high performance environment where these athletes are getting an experience that really sets them up for professional rugby in a good way, and they get degrees, and they can move on with life once rugby ends. So the holistic piece is actually already in place. And let's not forget that also Canadians don't count as foreigners, so it's Canadian eligible as well, which makes, they've always had a great ability to create skilled players. So the player pool overall, I think, is pretty strong. And if each new expansion team, let's just, throw out some numbers, they have the rights to 10 non-qualified players on the roster. And then, there's 15 to 25 players from the local environment. And there's probably 15 to 20 players either coming out of the current MLR structure or from the college game. That's a pretty robust pool of players that can compete for spots over a winter spring season.
So I guess a follow-up question there, and you can chime in on this first, because it's kind of for both of you, about the player pool. What is the goal of the league? Is the goal of the league to be a great professional rugby league, or is it to feed the national team? Is it to be both? Is it to be neither?
It's both, Matt, because I think for rugby to really take off, we need to be winning games against tier 1 countries on the national level. So our goal in New York, and I'd say Mags would agree with this, is to create great US qualified players. And just on the pathway, we are engaging with dozens of collegiate and club players from U18, say, from 17-year-olds to 21-year-olds, advising them on what they should do to possibly be future RUNY players. And that will get more aggressive and more interactive, and that pool will get wider and wider year on year, because that's the beauty of our system. And it is aspirational, but it's also on us to drive it, because we benefit by getting players that are American, which, to be honest with you, is what our fans in New York and Boston want. They want native sons on the field, and that's what we want too. And we want a national side that competes with tier 1. We want a top 5 national side. We also want a World Cup in America. All of it benefits us, and all of it benefits rugby.
So moving swift, just along from that, we talked about the usefulness or the utility of foreign players, foreign coaches, and what have you. And obviously, we had some news last week with the Scottish Rugby Union taking a stake in Old Glory DC, an MLR team. So it's not the first foreign stake, but it was the first one that's created a few waves here and there. Obviously in Scotland, given some of their travails in the club game. So James, if foreign ownership interest in the MLR, what are your thoughts on that? Open-ended question there.
It is, yeah, it's an open-ended question. I would be careful, and it's a case by case. And I will tell you, just this morning I was talking to the guys at Western Force about a no money relationship to develop players and possibly a game in the fall in Hong Kong. But there's developmental partnerships that I'd prefer rather than financial partnerships. For some reason, I don't like the idea of a foreign union owning a club in the US. I have no reason for it. It's intuitive.
How about
for
a
me.
partial ownership?
It would be the same answer. A lot of them don't really do business well. So outside of the obvious player resource abilities and technical exchange, I don't see how it would benefit the business of sports in America.
Mags, who thought that there'd be Irish people in Boston for you guys to have some kind of competition that had synergy?
That's
with
crazy.
The Cara Cup, right?
That's a crazy concept that there would be Irish diaspora in the New England area. That's crazy. Just going back to a couple of points there. You'd originally asked about the national teams and the goal and everything else. They're not mutually exclusive. We build a great product. We're within the same ecosystem. Everybody benefits. I think that's the goal for everybody, and it's not just making the experience better for those who are currently involved in rugby. Players, referees, administrators, in almost all cases are volunteers, and perhaps helping that pathway improve and giving opportunities for that whole body that supports the game and participates in the game, but bringing more people to the game at any of those levels. And that's, new players, to James's point, new referees, new coaches, new administrators, and new fans, people that just enjoy bringing their family to a game or bringing their buddies to a game because it's a fun thing to participate in, and that perhaps it's a 2-hour experience that they don't get currently in the American sporting landscape. And I think that's a really important piece of this. And to Steve's point, that is the goal. And if we do that, and we do that successfully, then we are giving value to our shareholders and everybody else who's involved in this enterprise. To the second point about DC and Scotland, I think that you've got 2 wonderful owners at DC, and they've got a long, awesome road ahead and journey ahead, and they're doing a lot of great things. And adding in other investors that can bring expertise in different areas is not a bad thing. Operationally, they're still controlled by the group that founded, and I think that's a real positive. I don't think that doesn't harm the league in any way. I just, over time, how liquid is that investment, and that just takes time for everybody to see the growth of it across the board. And certainly for us in Boston, we've chosen to keep it pretty tight in that regard, but make sure that we have partnerships that will help us grow. But that we can make sure that we can manage all the incentives, and I think that's happening across the league. Everybody's doing that in their own way.
You're okay with foreign ownership, I gather.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's not about foreign or not foreign. It's about, at the end of the day, who's responsible, is anybody who's owning or participating in this endeavor gonna add to the experience? And I think as long as people are doing that, then it's a real positive. I don't think that's a negative piece.
There's nothing wrong with foreign ownership per se. Right? This is a private business. All right, you've got a national governing body who are in hoc to World Rugby, who have a World Rugby member on the board, who can't make a decision without going to World Rugby. MLR is a private company.
I got your Scottish up there a little bit.
It's not called that.
I'm just asking the questions because
so it's not a foreign or non-foreign thing.
New York rivalry here is what I'm doing. That's the driving force. I'm trying to get them on opposite sides of the topic.
I would just go in there to Steve and Max. It is a private for-profit business. Profit drives this. We need to make profit, so we need to drive ticket sales. We need to drive the event experience. I agree with Max. It's the family entertainment part is a huge part of that. I put a T-shirt here about the values of rugby. That's what we can offer.
We have some RUNY stuff strewn throughout the set here.
I hear
it's remarkable.
that. Yeah, I heard that. I haven't really looked around. I mean, it's a massive set, so I mean, I actually haven't done the tour yet. $5 is too expensive.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, but for me, we had 19 U.S. qualified players in the 23-man squad at the weekend. That, for me, is like the biggest news from the weekend. Nobody's picked it up, but 19 U.S. qualified players were in that squad at the weekend. I'm proud of that. I am ecstatic
we just
at that.
picked it up just now with correspondent Kennedy.
And, maybe that's not the business of rugby, but I tell you, these New Yorkers, when they post something, when they interact, that's what people like, so...
Steve, you've got a question, I know, but let's break for a quick commercial, and we'll be right back with James Kennedy and Alex Magleby right after this.
Been blind since I was 4, and I've never seen a beer commercial or a beer label. None of that stuff influences me. I drink beer because of the taste, and my beer's Pabst Blue Ribbon. It has the taste and the flavor.
What do you think's on the label?
I think there's a naked woman riding on a unicorn, jumping over fire. Oh, that's good beer.
If you're in New York City and want to watch some great rugby, have some great food, and some great times, go to the world's best rugby pub, the Pig and Whistle on West 36th Street.
And we are back with James Kennedy and Alex Magleby and, of course, Steve Lewis. Steve, you had a question.
Yes, switching tack a little bit. I've got a question about the competition itself. All right, so we have 9 teams this year. Everyone plays everyone home and away. Report came out yesterday that the owners' meeting in Houston had agreed to move to a 2-conference system, 6 teams in each conference. Can you confirm it, and can you explain it? How does that work out in terms of fixtures, season length, etc.?
Mag's being on the competition committee. I'm going to defer that to him.
Oh, nicely
Deflection. Good deflection.
done. Nicely done. Give it to the rookie.
Steve, we decided on a competition structure that we feel suits the league next year that will be made public in the coming days. But it's exciting. There'll be quality teams involved, and
Sunwolves.
It's going to be yeah, exactly. It's going to be fun.
No smoke without fire, you know. As journalists, we've got to follow up these leads, but when it's out there on the internet, it's out there already.
You know, I also sold my team to the All Blacks, so you know.
Yeah, he did have me for a second on April Fool's Day with. Did you see the papers? I'm like, what? No. He says we sold to the All Blacks. I'm like, what? And I'm walking my dog, so I'm multitasking. So you had me for.
Hang on, your dog walks you, Matt. We all know
pretty
that.
Much. He does. But before we leave this topic, I just want to say, as a quintessential American sports fan, I don't care if a guy is yellow, purple, green, from Mars or whatever. If he's going to help the Mets, the Giants, the Knicks, or the New York Rangers, I don't care where he's from. So I don't know about this whole thing that you have to worry about it. My point would be that you got American players playing with all these other good international players.
Oh, we're back to that topic.
I just want to weigh in as an American guy that's a sports fan here in New York.
American? You American?
I'm an American. I'm just saying, I don't see it that way, and I see that the national team could grow that way even if there's an influx, because you don't have 1,000 rugby players that can qualify for Team USA right now. That's a reality. But more players getting exposure on a higher level to better players from both wherever they're coming from on these teams. It doesn't matter. I'm just saying that as a sports fan.
Is that your non sequitur rant over?
Yes.
And listen, I'll jump on that. Listen, we've got some names coming in next year, big names.
Sonny Bill Williams, Richie McCaw out of retirement.
Not Richie. So big names that will push on the local players, but I still believe that local and national players is really important, and that we should, as MLR, we should work on pathways.
Fair play
as well.
Fair play.
Yeah. One sort of final topic on the league itself, James. We were talking earlier. So we agree. Uptick in quality, the products looking pretty good, game's pretty good. How do you feel in terms of the sort of commercial spread, the ability to attract sponsors, and perhaps maybe the gates across the league? Successful in some places, struggling a wee bit in others. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Again, Seattle are phenomenal with that. San Diego, Utah, New Orleans, all getting visibly better. The numbers are better every day, every week on week. We here in New York, they're not great, and I think that's on me and my staff, specifically on me, to do a better job of selling, as Mags was saying, the event, the family friendliness of this, just the whole experience of going to a rugby match, the culture, the atmosphere, etc., etc. And we are learning, and we are doing, I think, a better job. It's a very crowded landscape, and the events goes into it. We're competing not just against other sporting events and Broadway shows, but whatever's going on your phone, whatever's on TV.
Well, and also the landscape itself, literally, is a more difficult proposition for you guys, because there's not this large amount or expanse of fields or stadiums or pitches to choose from, with parking and everything else that goes hand in hand.
Well, what I would say is in I think it was 95. I went to a Munster-Leinster game in Dublin, and there was no more than 200 people at the game. And I went as part of my high school team. The other high school team went, so that was a portion of that 200 people. So we need to, understand that, and rugby is the number 4 sport in Ireland at the time. It's the number 2 sport now, maybe number 3. So we bear that in mind, but we have to sell tickets. We have to fill stadiums, and that will reflect in sponsorship. Lots of great conversations, fantastic conversations with a whole pile of blue chip brands here in New York. We just have to prove continuity, success, and that we're getting people in the gates.
All right. We're basically out of time, but I got a question that people keep asking me, and maybe, James, you're involved in it more right now because your team's in the league. But when injuries happen, right, and you guys are doing it with smoke and mirrors with being dinged up in the back line, but guys are stepping up. You're 7-1. You want to you gutted it out in Austin or in San Antonio against the Austin Elite. What's the rule for adding players? Does it change at a certain juncture in the season? How does it affect the cap? How do you add if all you guys are hurt?
You said two things. It's driven by cap. We cannot go over cap, and you'll see players being signed late. We have one, possibly two players coming in. A lot of that's driven by visas. So the talent pool is stretched, especially when you start piling up injuries and you want to rest players and you don't want to overplay players. So you'll see signings. I think last season San Diego played a player in the playoff game because he just came through on a visa. I might be wrong with the team there. I know Austin played a player in the last game because it was a visa issue. So there currently is no restrictions on signing players. I'm sure we'll look at that. Alex will look at it in the competition committee, specifically towards playoffs. But there isn't off the shelf high caliber players that you can just pull in for a playoff game in America. So right now, North or South, right. Canada or the USA. So to pull in a foreign player, you'd want to be working on the visas now. Technically, could someone pull in a Pro 14 player for the playoffs? They could, because Pro 14 will be finished. But
any cap maneuvering, players traded for cap purposes yet, or when's that going to start?
We've traded for an allotment, and I think a few teams have done that. We've traded two to another team. We haven't traded any players yet. We have talked about it. The players have not chosen not to move. I think Mags will be better to answer that, given his position on the competition committee. You can talk a bit more about that.
I just want to take a poke at that. We literally have 30 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the short answer is yes. The long answer is yes. There's flexibility of movement in the league. Your issue, if you're bringing in somebody from overseas, if they're not otherwise allowed to work here, is ensuring that there's proper, documentation and visa in place, and that's a long process. And so you're trading with other teams. You're picking from a domestic player pool, and that's then if you have injuries, there's offsets based on salary cap to mitigate against those injuries. So that's a way to look at it.
Your final question.
Yeah. 2 words. Workers' comp.
Sorry, Stevie.
Workers' comp also is going to be an issue for you guys.
Yeah.
And my last question would be that you talk about expansion teams being able to ring fence players for existing franchises. How do you persuade a kid to go from New York to, say, Salt Lake for $15,000 or $20,000? How do you make players who are centrally signed go somewhere against their will, or are we not at that stage yet? Are we?
I don't think we've seen a case yet where. I don't think we've seen a case yet that I can think of where a player has actually been forced to leave a territory or an area because they were forced to by the league. We haven't seen that play out yet. That's not. For the most part, the league is try to figure out a way to make things work as best possible. Yeah, where opportunities may arise in some other place.
There's a lot. Sorry, Max. There's a lot of communication between the teams. I mean, Max, we've talked to you about possibly loaning a couple of players off you.
Absolutely.
Last year, we loaned a bunch of players to Austin. We worked on loaning players to Houston earlier this year. It just didn't get done. It didn't work out. So there is a lot of back channel between the directors of rugby or the head coaches or whatever the specific role in each club is about trading players. It's to our benefit to give players game time if we're deep in positions, like we're perhaps deep in front row. So I think Mags would be the same. I think all the teams would be the same on that.
All right, well, fellas, unfortunately we are out of time. Steve, we could talk to these guys all over, and we could really, really have you guys in again. So I appreciate James Kennedy, owner of Rugby United New York, Mr. Alex Magleby, CEO and co-founder of the New England Freejacks, and Steve Lewis. And on behalf of all these gentlemen, I'm Matt McCarthy for Rugby Wrap Up.
Erudite Steve Lewis.
Sagacious.
And on behalf of these gentlemen, I'm Matt McCarthy at the Fantasy Sports Network, Studio 34 in New York City for Rugby Wrap Up, signing off.